Well, I know they were messing with the water, letting reserves go for one reason or another. And then in the events like this, you sort of look, oh, is it on purpose?
Just heard about that critical water reservoir in Pacific Palisades. It was completely empty when thousands of homes burned. So this massive 117 million gallon reservoir was shut down last February for a simple cover repair. But here's the thing. Almost a year later, nothing was fixed. Governor Newsom's now demanding answers about why this lifeline was offline.
Water is the next crypto. Water is the next whatever, gold. Water. You've seen the movies with Mel Gibson, Mad Max. That's where we're headed. That's it. Money doesn't mean anything. Water. And I've got some really smart guys that I've known for 35, 40 years that have been buying up water rights around the world for 30 plus years. And now, and they're not for sale. He's not buying it for the land. He's buying it for the water rights. Why are people so stupid?
Linda and Stuart Resnick own 60% of California's water. This California, where multiple fires are currently at 0% containment.
The billionaires who own most of California's water, the Resnicks. Since y'all are going around suing people who are talking about you for legal purposes, this is all alleged. Back in the late 80s, California was creating and building their water bank system. Resnicks were also building their farming business. In 1994, people who worked in government and people in the private sector held a very secret meeting. They wrote California's water laws, and it went from the people being able to access the water to it going into private sector. Resnicks ended up walking out owning about 60% of all of California's water. They have a 57% stake in a public-private partnership that operates a water bank, stores about 500 billion gallons of water. What did the Resnicks decide to do with this water? Hold it hostage, quite literally sell it back to the people as drinking water and use it for their wonderful company. Most of the counties that the Resnicks own their water, it's home to marginalized communities, made up of migrant farm workers or immigrants that don't have access to necessary water. They reported that based on their tax returns, they allegedly send anywhere around $200,000 to $500,000 to the IDF every single year. Guess who allegedly lobbies for more sanctions and tension with Iran because they hate their pistachios and they don't want any kind of competition.
Their name is the Resnicks, and they own the Palm Wonderful Company, which owns Fiji Water, Palm Pomegranates, and Wonderful Pistachios. Also, huge Zionists. In 1994, the public water access in California was taken away from the state and divided up amongst a bunch of private contractors. One of those private contractors was the Resnicks, and they purchased 60% of the state's fresh water resources. They own the majority of all the fresh water in the state of California.
While 40 million California residents face historic droughts, they make their profits by selling the water to other states and outspending smaller farmers on water rights, which drives up the prices.
While 40 million Californians suffer through unprecedented drought, one billionaire couple owns a massive share of the state's water system, seized in a series of secretive meetings 2 decades ago. That system was largely paid for by the very taxpayers whose water these billionaires hold hostage. Urban water systems are desperate for water, but in 2023, they'll receive just 5% of what they requested from the state. The Resnicks are the biggest farmers in California. As of 2007, they owned 4 San Francisco's worth of farmland, and nearly half of Americans buy at least one of their products. Their pistachios, their pomegranate juice, their mandarins, their flowers. It's all under one massive umbrella, the Wonderful Company, a privately owned company worth at least $5 billion. The majority owners, the Resnicks, are worth at least $8 billion. How were they able to take over such a large percentage of what should be a shared public resource? As the Resnicks were building their empire, the state of California was building new water infrastructure with taxpayer money. California's natural water supply is very inconsistent. Vastly differing amounts of rainfall means the state can go from surplus to drought and back very easily. So they build water banks to store water during surpluses to have during droughts. One important storage facility is the Curran Water Bank, started in 1988. The facility was built with hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars, which could have been a good thing. The people of California would have owned the water. But there were two Californians thirstier than the rest, and they wanted more water. Linda and Stuart Resnick, and they had a lot of political power. We'll get to that. In 1994, state water officials, water infrastructure contractors, and agricultural landowners with water rights arranged a secretive meeting at a resort in Monterey Bay, California. These groups, a mix of private companies and public agencies, rewrote California's water rules without any input from voters, taxpayers, or legislators. The new rules, called the Monterey Plus Agreement or the Monterey Amendments, were devastating for working Californians, and great for agriculture billionaires. The original code included urban preference, a long-standing rule that in times of drought, the State Water Board would give urban areas, where people live, access to water supplies before agricultural interests. Monterey axed that. That means that in times of drought, the water systems for normal Californians would have to buy water from private companies, because they weren't getting it from the state. The new agreement also loosened regulations on paper water. That's water that doesn't necessarily exist anywhere but on paper. The full quantities of water that providers could have, but don't actually need to have. Today, 5 times as much water has been promised and sold as actually exists. And importantly, the meeting changed ownership of the Kern Water Bank. What once belonged to the state was transferred to a few private water contractors, one of which was Westside Mutual, a wholly owned subsidiary of Wonderful Foods. The wonderful employee who runs Westside, Bill Phillimore, is the chairman of the public organization that manages the Kern Water Bank. Boom. One secret meeting, and the Resnicks owned nearly 60% of an important California water resource, built with hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money. The new ownership, combined with the rules on paper and surplus water, meant that during times of drought, the Resnicks could sell Kern water back to the state water systems. They took Californian taxpayers' water and sold it back to them. That's just one water bank. The Resnicks also have control of other water boards and have been sued for directing more water towards their properties. So how do they get away with this Chinatown-level chicanery? Resnicks donate millions of dollars to politicians and research institutions, which help them secure control over water systems, and even get more water and more taxpayer funding. One important project is the proposed California Delta Tunnel, a taxpayer-funded project which would send water from Northern California to Central, where the Resnicks farms are. They've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on state and federal legislation and politicians who support the tunnel project. They allegedly lobby for increased tensions with Iran to keep embargoes on superior Iranian pistachios. Their giant crops lead to monocultures which kill important pollinators. They siphon taxpayer dollars into the company town charter schools they own, set up to train children to work for their farms. And of course, like any company of this size, they exploit their workers. We need to treat water for what it is, a necessary public resource, a human right, and something that shouldn't be owned by anyone, and work towards legislative change that stops people like the Resnicks from stealing it.
Water used to be considered a public right. That was until 1994 when there was a secret meeting. These two were in attendance, and it was divided up by private interest groups. Before the 1994 secret meeting, water used to go to the citizens first. But that all changed, and now it goes to agriculture needs. And with the Resnicks being the largest farmers in California, guess who gets the most water? What makes it even worse is that they sell water back to the county, but it's considered paper water. So most of the time, the amount of water that they buy is not even the amount of water that's actually on hand. This has been a problem for the state for years, but there's been little to do anything to change it. We should boycott the Wonderful Company, not only for the destruction that they're causing in California, the destruction they cause abroad by supporting the occupation of Gaza.
Y'all wanted to play the fuck around game so goddamn badly. Well, you are fixing to find out very bigly.